strive for the changes we need. So it will be very interesting to hear her perspective of what she felt in the moment of seeing someone from her own job possibly taking a person's life, and what she did to defend and actually save and preserve a life, and even the economical consequences that come with that. And I think that's the most critical piece of the conversation: how to use fear of our economical livelihood, our homes, our food on our tables, the things we use to pay our bills, our cars, other things, etc. I think it's very important to listen to that story of what she's going to tell, realizing when it all happened and unfolded for her, what took place, and even where she's at today and how she's continued to join the fight of the injustice that we're facing. And she has personal experience to that accountability. So I'm definitely looking very forward to this member's conversation and her story, because I do think it's very important just in the time frame of era of the movement we are in, and a critical barrier I think that is being definitely resolved daily. It's crumbling in its foundation daily. And we know that the police has definitely been used as a form of force to control and protect white supremacy and racism in this country. So it'd be very interesting just to hear how she took a real swing at that stature of pillar in our community, in our country, and more importantly, what it created her to be today in the time era of the most critical point of the movement, in my opinion, that we're facing as the African American and the American population. So thank you all for attending. I appreciate that. And I'm sorry, I hope I didn't take up too much time or destroy the conversation for anyone. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much, Constance, for taking the lead, and while I was busy checking on Ms. Horne, and for explaining that. I very much appreciate it. So very much. Ms. Horne is with us, so we will be starting. We're very glad to have her. Give me just a
Thank you. I'm
moment to
sorry
get my
about that.
notes up. It's okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Greta McLean with Silent No Longer Tennessee, and I want to thank you for joining us tonight. We scheduled Accountability Blues as part of our events for Sexual Assault Awareness Month, in part because of the 46 men and women from the Metro Nashville Police Department who had the courage to come forward and report sexual assault, sexual harassment, gender bias, racism, and retaliation from not only their fellow officers, but as well, their supervisors as well. We also believe that Dr. King was absolutely right when he said injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So even though our guest this evening won't be speaking specifically about sexual violence, we definitely understand the importance of holding our law enforcement accountable, especially when department leadership allows misconduct to go unchecked and allows a toxic work environment to take root. And now I want to quickly thank Constance and Black Coffee Justice for being our co-host this evening. Really appreciate you coming on board. And again, thank you for your help as we were waiting. And I want to thank my sister from Philly, Naseem from Iron Throne Radio, for helping me with the event tonight. And now it's my great honor to introduce Ms. Cariol Horne. Ms. Horne served as the city of Buffalo, New York as a police officer for nearly 20 years. And shortly before becoming eligible for her pension, she was fired. Fired because she dared to stop a fellow police officer from choking a handcuffed African American man who was under arrest. When she intervened, she was physically assaulted by the officer, which has led to physical and psychological impact on her daily life, as well as it severely affected her financial stability. Cariol, thank you so much for agreeing to be with us tonight. It is indeed an honor to have you. And for those who are not familiar with your story, can you please explain the events that led up to you intervening on Mr. Mack's behalf, and then what happened after that?
Okay, on November 1st of 2006, it was a officer in trouble call that I was dispatched to. Actually, I volunteered to go to the call. So once I heard it, I let radio know that I was going to also go on that call. When I got there, inside of the house, Neil Mack was already in handcuffs and being punched in the face. I didn't know what happened prior to me coming there, so I didn't do anything except to help get him out of the house. Um, Once we got outside of the house, and we were me and other officers, we were going back to our police vehicles. Gregory Kwiatkowski was in front of me with Neil Mack, and then he stopped and he turned him around and just started choking him. So when I yelled to him, "Greg, you're choking him," thinking that, he'll come back to reality, whatever happened, he'll understand that it's over and basically stop choking him and we can move on. Well, he didn't stop choking him, so I grabbed his arm from around his neck. I was fired for doing that. But of course, that story wasn't interesting enough for them, so they changed the story, said I jumped on his back, turned around, pushed another officer, as if I was the one that came on the scene and was just out of control for like no reason. And I said, the only thing they had to do was ask one question, and that question is why? Why would I come on scene of an officer in trouble call to fight other officers for no reason? It didn't happen that way. Like I said, there was two incidents, one inside the house where he was choking him when he was handcuffed. I mean, not when he was punching him in the face while he was handcuffed. And then on the outside where he was choking him when he was handcuffed. So at no point did I ever try to unarrest him because I knew it was clear to me from the beginning that he was under arrest when I went into the house. So that's what happened. So I was fired for that. Can't hear you.
You gotta mute yourself. You're muted, Miss Greta. You're muted.
There's always technical difficulties. Sorry about that. Um, thank you for sharing that. If I'm not mistaken, he also testified or under oath. I don't know whether it was in court or in a deposition, but he said that you did not jump on his back, but the department still was assuming or not listening to that. Am I correct in that?
When they charged me with um, like grabbing him and or jumping on his back and or the officers, their stories were so different that they didn't know what the story was. So they just put something together and charged me with it. And he did say in sworn testimony that I did not jump on his back, where the female officer, Ann Vaniel, who said that I turned around, pushed her, and caused her injury to her leg. Um, she came, she gave this whole scenario. She actually used it. We used a chair. She showed how I supposedly was on his back. He came in 15 minutes later after her testimony and was shown the same scenario that she had just given. And he said she was never on my back, which is the truth. I was never on his back. Well, he said I was never on top of him, but I never was on his back because we were face to face. So when I grabbed his arm, he had Neil Mack against his chest, and I was in front of both of them. So I didn't even have access to his back to jump on it.
I want to ask you few questions, and then we're going to be taking questions from people that are here with us in Zoom and also on Facebook. Um, and some of this you may or may not be aware or have seen before, but I just want to get your general impression or thoughts. A 2019 report by the Urban Institute found that recent studies showed that body cameras do not reduce the use of force used by officers. Do you believe that body cameras are still necessary, not only for accountability, but also for the safety and protection of our community? as well as the police officers?
I think that body cameras are definitely necessary. Um, I don't know who did that stat or where the numbers came from, um, but there is still a lot of police brutality going on. Um, and I think some of that is partly because they still feel they can get away with it because we still have that blue wall of silence.
Yes. Thankfully,
And
that seems to. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Miss Horne.
that's the purpose of Cariol's law.
Exactly. And I promise we're going to get to that. And for those, if you can see it behind me, I do have the web address for Cariol's Law so that you can look at it. And we'll be discussing that here shortly in more detail.
Hey, Greta, if you don't mind, let me hop in and grab a question too. I would like to share a little bit of Q&A with you so that way more time is given to the attendance of our co-hosting tonight. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely.
All right, sis, I got a couple of questions I'm already thinking about. My first question is, I think it's important to recognize, how long have you been on the force at that time?
At that time, 18 years.
18-year veteran of the force. The second question is, you kind of brought it into the concept that was already asked, but I want to kind of confirm that. What direction were you approaching? Because you said that, you said you came from a frontal position. I guess his arm was, I was assuming, wrapped around his neck, or he was using an instrument to choke with, something from the front, and you just removed the restraint from the front, correct?
Correct.
And I guess the next question I have is, did you think that the department was going to punish you for the response that you took, seeing excessive use of force that was unnecessary for the situation? And if anything, you eliminated unnecessary force, and that should have been maybe a recommendation for the officer who was using the unnecessary force, because he was in handcuffs, correct?
He was.
And so, yeah, I guess that's my other part, is that, did you think the department was going to punish you, or was you surprised to see that you were being punished?
Well, actually, I didn't give it any thought, when I did grab his arm from around his neck. What I did think of was another person that had been killed by the police. His name was Mark Virginia, and he was killed by the police years prior. And that's what I thought of, about the officers there who didn't do anything, but I just felt like I was not going to let a Mark Virginia happen while I was standing there. Now, in the past, I have watched police brutality where I just felt like, if they hit him one more time, I'm gonna stop him. I'll stop him. But at the same time, I just froze because I thought about, who am I gonna tell? Like, there's no one to go to because the hierarchy would cover it up.
So that leads into my last question before I give it back to Greta, and I may interrupt again, so excuse me for that, ladies. I'm sorry, Greta, we should have better communicate that.
No,
But that's what I was going right into. I was like, for Black people, I'm just gonna be real. We don't trust the police. Let's just be 100. We have no reason to. The history of the police has told us that we should not trust them. And so I guess that's what I want to touch a little bit on, is what is it like to be a Black person who probably most likely lives in a Black community, who has family members who's even had negative encounters with police, and you're a member of this police, and even watching police brutality, you said you have your own history of watching police brutality unfold. What is it like to be Black and be a cop at a job that we all know that, unfortunately, as Black people, we just don't fool with it? Excuse my language, I want to cuss, but we don't fool with the police, and we all know that. So what is that like, sis? Come on, keep 100. What is that like?
I am. So actually the job itself, I love the job itself because I liked, being able to help people. But what I didn't like about the job was the people I worked with. It's like they did not want me to be empathetic to my people. And it's like, it's not even just Black people, because when I went to, we went on a call where there was a white woman and her house was totally trashed. The kids were just like sitting around doing nothing. And so basically I'm trying to talk to this woman, and basically I guess I shouldn't have been trying to clean up, but you know, at the same time, it was like
Right.
just trying to give them some, trying to show them that it wasn't that hard, you know, like
Right.
if they were
Right.
together.
Right.
And basically, the the lieutenant was basically like, "Why are you doing that?" But my thing was to show them what, I mean, maybe it was, I mean, for I don't actually think it was foolish, but at the
Mhm.
same time that it was other ways that to get that family help. But I didn't like how they pretty much just was like, no, they're just slobs or whatever. I don't like looking down on people, and definitely because I was homeless and everything at a time too. So there's no need for me to be looking down on anybody
That's
unless
right.
I'm pulling up. So, you know, for me, I was thinking like, you're a white officer, she's a Caucasian lady, so you would think that she would want to help her. But sometimes officers think that they are better than other people, the people that we serve. And I didn't like that. I didn't like that mentality.
Thank you so much, Miss Horn. All right, Miss Greta, I'm gonna get quiet for a second.
Jump in anytime. You know you're welcome. Um, Ms. Horn, I also wanted to ask, we've been watching, or some of us probably have been somewhat at least following the Derek Chauvin trial the last couple of weeks. And during the trial, we've learned that there have been approximately 20 different excessive force claims made against him. And in your incident, there had been at least one complaint against Gregory Kwiatkowski. Am I pronouncing his name right?
Kwiatkowski.
For assaulting a fellow officer. And then following your incident, he was suspended because he had used excessive force, or I'm sorry, he had grabbed another officer around the throat because he thought that the officer was transferring out of his command. And then following that, he was actually arrested and served 4 months in jail for excessive force on 4 teenagers who were African American. Um, I'm wondering if the the standard practice is for police departments typically, if there are complaints, to handle the complaints and do internal investigations. Do you believe that that is reasonable, or do you believe departments can gain more trust and respect from the community, which a lot don't have right now, if they were more willing to allow an outside agency, such as an oversight board or something like that, to conduct the investigation of complaints? And do you think that that could potentially save lives because it would root out officers like Chauvin and Kwiatkowski? Did we lose her? There she is.
But I don't know what happened.
Did That's okay. Did you hear this? Did you hear the question?
I, no, because it went out. It went out and reconnected.
Okay. Um, I'm going to leave some of the background out of it, but I will just say um, there's numerous instances of officers having complaints for excessive force, and nothing seems to get done about it. Um, so my question is, do you believe that the standard practice of having police departments conduct internal investigations on complaints is reasonable, or do you believe that the communities would be better served if and departments could gain more trust and respect from the community if they were willing to allow an outside agency such as an oversight board to conduct the investigations of the complaints?
Well, I don't think that it's I don't think the police should be investigating the police. Not at all. So I definitely think that an independent committee should be doing that, comprising of the community and even some people from the law
believe she froze.
Yeah, I think she froze up. I just want to take the moment while she's freezed out that I do want to give some advice to the Nashville community about your attempts to get an
Right.
oversight board. Oh, okay, there she is. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't understand what's going on, but it just went out again. So yeah, I do think that an oversight board should do the community complaints against police.
Thank you, Ms. Horne. Constance, please.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're cutting out on us a little bit, but it's all good. We're gonna make it work. So she was asking about the outside investigations, but I know that Nashville is a neighboring partner of us, and they do hold our state legislation home as well. But I definitely can speak to locally how community oversight is failing because number one, our state legislator helped depower our oversight board. And number two, the good old boy system. It's a reality. And unfortunately, the board that represents our oversight board is very concerning because it truly does not represent the voice of the community. These are hand-selected individuals by local and state and even federal politicians that say that they like these individuals into the oversight board because what they're going to do is protect what? The police, exactly. And so I'm very concerned that when we start moving the conversation of oversight board, that it's important to speak with neighboring cities who have one to tell you all some of the flaws so you can strengthen your oversight board and we can use that to even piggyback to strengthen our oversight boards. Because unfortunately, the issues in Tennessee particularly, and I'm sure even up in New York, you deal with the same thing because I speak with homies in New York who are on the activist front lines there. We definitely have to attack these state legislators. I think that I want to add a little piece, and then I got a question for you, Ms. Horne, is that, I just find it disappointing that in Joe Biden's first roughly 100 days we're coming up on in office, he has not passed a single legislation to protect the African-American community. We had an attack on the Asian-American community, and I'm not knocking the Asian-American community. It's not right to have violence in any form. Unfortunately, white supremacy uses violence quite a bit. But the point is, like we already been talking, a time frame. We are at 620 years of oppression, and yet Joe Biden passed a law against the violence of Asian Americans, but he has not passed a single thing for the African Americans who even came from the slavery state of living this. So it's just very, very heartbreaking to see this type of policy. And then you have almost 300 plus policies of voter suppression in our country, but you have no laws protecting Black employees who are watching incidents happen and trying to defend that. Black people in our communities and the violence that we have to deal with daily in our economic, not just even physical, it's economical violence. It's the redlining of the banks. It's a lot of things that we're talking about when you really start looking at social justice. If you look at just the Black scope of that, what that really looks like. And so this leads me into my next question for you, which is that what was the outcome of the case? And then what did that drive you to move into next? Like, okay, this has happened to me. I go through a whole case, the process takes place, this is what happens. And now this is what I learned from this situation. And this is what I'm going to do something about it. Because I think that's the key piece. There's doers and then there's talkers. And from my understanding, Ms. Horne, you're a doer. You learned the lesson and you became a doer right behind that. So I want you to share that part too, sis, to empower people. What happened with this case? And then what happened after the case that made you just get like, I'm going knee deep in the trenches to the fight for injustice?
So after I got fired, I basically thought of a law. I mean, years later, I thought of a law, or not necessarily a law at the time, but it was like, I thought of a solution. That's what I should say. I thought of a solution, but I didn't know how to implement it. So I was asking around, and then people would say, oh yeah, I can help you with that. But then it never came they never came forward to help. So last year, I had been working with Terry Watson. He started Strategies for Justice. Basically, it's like former law enforcement on a speakers bureau. So basically, I had been working with him for about a year, and so I told him, we hear about the problems all the time, but, I came up with a solution. but I just don't know how to go about implementing the solution. So I told him about it, and he basically had it written up and added to it, and that's Cariol's law. So then, of course, then we had the Cariol's law team push it. Then the activists, advocators, uh, basically, it's like people came out of the woodwork to help push it because they liked that solution. So the Common Council here passed it, and then the mayor, he took a month to sign it, but he eventually did sign it. So now it is a law, and it's Cariol's law duty to intervene. So one thing that they didn't pass that we wrote into the law was the registry. And that's important because we don't want officers leaving here in Buffalo and coming to Tennessee to get a job. There needs to be a national registry. So if you mess up in one place, you cannot go to another department. So we need that. And then also, Terry wrote the part about losing funding. So basically, if they don't go by the law, then they lose funding. But Terry can better explain that part to he can better explain that part. So I don't want to take that away from him, but either way it goes. But there is retroactive, and that's what I'm depending on right now, is that they can go back 20 years and make me whole for firing me for something that I should have been doing in the first place. Right. So that's one thing, the duty to intervene, and basically, no falsifying records and everything that we know that they do. Like this would cover under that. It would cover people under that, but we haven't used it yet. And it's like I'm waiting for, not that I should want a situation to happen so we can use it, because I don't want a situation to happen so that we can use it. We want to believe that our officers are great, but if they're not great, then I want to be the first one to push it. I want to be there saying, hey, wait a minute, we can use Cariol's law for this. They need, especially if any officers stand by like they did in the George Floyd case.
Right. See, I think we're at a pivotal turn for your type of laws, because, when I think about Tennessee and some of the demands that my team just went to our Capitol Hill with in January to start the year, during first legislation, we pushed for full unemployment benefits, we pushed for the full Medicare Act, and we pushed for the Breonna Taylor and I Can't Breathe Act. And I just feel like Cariol law piggybacks right on into the back of that too. Because at the end of the day, we need laws and legislation that's already written, that all we have to do is adopt and infiltrate into our own state legislator that will help further protect people that look like us. So I definitely want the information to Cariol's Act, because now it's going to become a part of my state legislative package for our statewide campaign. We need this act to be passed, period. It's another protection law. And so I guess one of my final questions before we have the infamous Terry come on the line and talk to us is watching the George Floyd case. I think there's something interesting happening here, because you have the police department actually standing against Mr. Chavez for his behavior. And so I think that this is interesting, because normally you see cops do, in your case, what they did, which is stack against you, falsify documents, just make up information just to be in the good old boy system, the FOP, as we know, the Fraternal Order of Police. Everybody knows that is a treacherous organization in our communities, in this state. This country has allowed something to manifest itself. And that's why when you talked about believing every cop is a good cop, I would like to believe that, but in honesty, no, it's not true. It's actually one of the farthest things from the truth. Because not only African-American cops who have been in police force talked about it, but I've heard white cops, Hispanic cops, many members of the police organization that have left it to say, I left because it was so corrupted. It was so many different things happening. So as we watch the George Floyd case unfolding, and you've been in the internal network of the justice system now, see, this is where I get a little deeper with this. It's the police department, then you got the judges, and you got the lawyers, and you got the bellsman who's going to take them in and out of court. You got that whole network that's happening right now. The fraternal order police who's dumping money into his administrative and legal fees right now. Do you think America is going to actually convict Derek Chauvin for his crimes? Or do you think, once again, the dependency of white supremacy, which is what its defense is based upon, will prevail? And once again, we'll watch a white man kill a black man for absolutely zero reason other than he was the wrong color on that day.
I don't have faith in the justice system. I think that the jurors have to think twice about ignoring information because they know what the climate is in this world today. And I think that they would think twice before they decide to let him off, knowing that they saw what they saw. You know, I like to get into the chats of the people talking about, you know, who agree with me. But then I decided to get into a chat where they were like, nope, nobody can give an opinion. We have to stand here like we're the jury. So because I got in and I was like, he was on his neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. That's murder. And they were like, you're judging. And they were like, you are basically disqualified as a juror. But I didn't know. So I was like, well, what are the rules of this room? Because I didn't know. I just was giving my opinion, right? So basically, I got it that I was supposed to be a juror. I was supposed to be listening to the facts, but I can't help it. You know, I have to like say what it is what it is. So then they were saying, well, he was on drugs, and I said, oh, he OD'd, and I said, well, he OD'd like maybe a month prior, but he was able to get to the hospital and get some help. So that's how he was able to be there that day. And so what if he had been taken to the hospital, he could have lived again. So basically I said, but you like basically he was on his neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. And they were saying, oh, well, that expert came in and he said that he was on his back. I'm thinking like, okay, they are looking for a reason for him to get off. They're looking for technicalities. But the good thing about being in that room was then I got to see how they think, you know? So that was important that I was able to see how they think. And what they're thinking about is the technicalities so that he can get off. It's not whether he did it or not. They already know he did it. They don't care. They're looking for the technicalities. So I forgot what the question was. I forgot what the question was.
Thank you, Ms. Horne. You answered it to the T. You hit it all on the money. Thank you so much. I'm gonna let Ms. Greta get on the mic, but yes, thank you. Thank you.
Are you somewhat encouraged by the fact that there are several fellow officers who are coming out and basically saying,
I can't hear you, Greta.
can you hear me now? No,
I can hear you.
you can?
I can hear you now.
Okay, good. Are you encouraged that there are so many officers that are coming out and saying, no, he was wrong, and several of them that have even called it murder? Do you think that that is a good sign that maybe the good officers are going to be more willing to stand up, and that in partnership with Cariol's law, do you think that we stand a chance of having more the good officers doing what's right, so that we can start weeding out the bad officers? And I think she froze. Just my personal opinion, which doesn't necessarily count for anything. I'm hopeful, um, cautiously optimistic. I like seeing other officers stand up and be that vocal, that publicly. It's not something that we've really seen in some of the past um, murders. And I'm hoping that there will be more, but who knows? Miss Horn, did you hear the question?
I heard part of it and then it went out. I go from 5 bars to no bars, and I don't understand why that keeps happening. But um, you can say it again quickly. What the question was?
Quickly, are you encouraged by the fact that there are so many officers that are coming out criticizing Chauvin and actually calling it a murder? Do you think that that will start increasing? That more of the good officers will be willing to stand up? That in partnership with Cariol's law, so that officers can't be retaliated against. Do you think maybe that we do have a growing movement and we can weed out some of the bad officers?
I definitely think that the culture is changing because people are not willing to give up their livelihood for somebody else's stupidity. And I constantly say that the first training you get is home training, but we don't know what people are learning at home. So you have to use your common sense. So if you don't have that, you don't need to be on a department in the first place. You can't teach somebody to be personable. You can't teach them to so it's like if you're just on the job because you want to be gun ho, then you're there for the wrong reason.
Right, right. That's why they made the military. It's called
And
the military at that point.
we have a quick
Um,
question. Oh, I'm sorry.
no, I was gonna ask her about one thing. So let's get to this point. It's a point that I think that's valid at this point. Do you think that if police immunity was removed, like tomorrow, that you would see less cop violence to the public? Do you think that's one of the protection barriers that a lot of cops are leaning on? That the fact that there's a whole federal law that says you get this benefit of doubt in the moment of your actions because we're going to give you the benefit of doubt as a human being on a job dealing with other human beings, dangerous situations, that you're going to be deemed a little bit of grace in situations that could become violent or is violent because you have to make rapid decisions to save multiple lives. So do you think police immunity is a common source that we see white supremacy and race soldiers in our police forces particularly leaning upon to save themselves? They're committing these very crimes of killing people, like we see with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Eric Gordon. I mean, the Michael Brown. The list is long. Sandra Bland. Too many names to say. So, at some point, when do we say, "Okay, cop, no, you're like everybody else at your job. Right is right and wrong is wrong. And if you do something wrong, your ass can be fired. And in this case, if you kill somebody, you can be charged." How do you feel about police immunity?
First of all, I think qualified immunity. I say immunity. Qualified immunity should be done away with. And in New York State, I know it has, but I don't know how it has at what level. So I do have to read up on that. But at the same time,
Read that law.
you know, sometimes you have to make splits. Sometimes you have to make split second decisions, and I get qualified immunity in that case. But Derek Chauvin had 9 minutes and 29 seconds to think about getting his knee off of George Floyd's neck, back, or whatever they want to call it, and to get him some help, and he did not do it. So there should be no qualified immunity there because his life, number one, was not in danger. He was there with a handcuffed man with 3 other officers. None of them did anything. And even though I feel bad for the one officer who said, should we turn him over? The point is common sense should have kicked in and said, I'm not going to ask. I'm just going to do it. And then I'll just deal with whatever they say later on. So he didn't do it. Common sense did kick in a little bit, but he didn't know how to react. And I understand why he didn't do it. But although I understand, it doesn't make it right. So qualified immunity should definitely be done away with in situations definitely like this one.
Again, thank you, Mother Elder. I appreciate your words. You went from sis to Miss Horne to you are an elder, and I respect that. Thank you, Elder, for your words. Thank you.
one thing, well, we've got a couple questions from Facebook, so I want to get to that, but I want to ask one more thing before we start getting to other people's questions. Is as activists, as advocates, and just members of the community, what can we do to help support the good officers that are truly trying to do the right thing and protect and serve their community, um, so that they can do what you did, and protect the community and other officers from the bad apples? And what can we do to help encourage leadership to, change the culture and not punish officers who break that blue line? I mean, it's something we know has to be done. And I'm just wondering, besides Cariol's Law, which I want you to speak to in depth
Mhm.
here, along with this answer, but is there anything else that the average person can do to help the process?
Well, first of all, join the National Call for Cariol's Law, because then officers, if there's a law in their city, state, or nationwide, if there's a law, then officers who are afraid to do something would say, well, I can't break the law. I have to do something. So that guy who said, should we turn him over? If he would have known that there was a Cariol's Law, he would have been like, I don't have no other choice. I'm not going to jail. And he would have did it. So Cariol's Law definitely pushed that. And as far as police officers, sometimes they're not going to speak just to anybody. So even though the community wants to help, they're not going to tell you what's going on because they have to stand behind that blue line. They don't want to cross it because then they won't have backup. So that's real. I was going to felony cause by myself because they didn't want to come to back me up. But I just knew how to treat people. I knew how to talk to people. So sometimes you have to use your greatest weapon, which is your mind. And some people, for whatever reason, they want to go for what's around their waist. Their guns, their tasers, their pepper spray. But your mind is your greatest weapon, and that's the one that you should use.
No, I was going to piggyback with you,
No,
Ms. Curl. Like I said, I want your information sent to Black Coffee Justice. I hope that before we end this whole soon, I can get your contact because Curling Law is going on my statewide platform. Like I said, we just added right under Breonna Taylor Law. I Can't Breathe Back, and Curling Law is going right underneath it now. We're going to push that because, like I said, it is critical that we take policies to protect ourselves into our state legislator to push to our federal legislator. This is something that will federally become a law in the near future.
Right.
And I hope that what people are paying attention to what we're talking about here, particularly, is political powers that we're talking about right now, and how we need to write legislation to build ourselves up, to empower us and protect us. And so that's like I said, it starts at the state level and then we go federal with these types of things. So yes, curling law will be a federal legislation, an amendment in our constitution in the near future, just like Breonna Taylor and I Can't Breathe Back will go right along with it, because this has to stop, and it does take political power to do so. So thank you, Ms. Horne, so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. Thank you.
could you go into more in depth of what we can do? Because I know we have people from all over the United States in this meeting and watching the live stream. What can organizations and individuals, legislators, pastors, whomever, what can they do to get more information about your law and to help spread awareness so that we can get this, you know, nationwide?
Okay. So Cariol's Law, of course, is the duty to intervene and its protections for officers who do stand up against, the police brutality. Because like you saw in the George Floyd murder, nobody could step forward. The only people there that could have stopped his murder was other officers. So if they feel empowered to do that, then they will do it. But obviously those officers didn't feel empowered to do that. So we have to push Cariol's Law now. We have a toolkit, and you can get more information at cariolslaw.com. So you can go to cariolslaw.com and leave your information, and we can get a toolkit to you. And basically, we can do teach-ins also. So we can do, well, with COVID, we can do the Zooms, and basically run classes of what the law is, break it down, and tell you how you can contribute to getting it passed in your city, your state, and we can get it passed nationwide.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Did I answer your question, Pooh? Oh.
You want to speak at
Yes, ma'am.
Juneteenth this year? I don't know if she heard me.
You talking to me?
Yeah. Do you want to come to speak at Juneteenth about Carolyn's Law?
Yeah, of course. Of
All right,
course.
we're gonna talk about it. We're gonna talk about it. Okay, Ms. Greta, let's holler at the community.
Okay.
We have, let's see, let me go back and find his name. Anthony on Facebook Live, who was wondering how a Black officer can get involved with your organization, I guess Cariol's Law and Strategies for Justice. I don't know whether you or Terry want to answer that.
Terry can answer Strategies for Justice. And then there's Sean Kennedy that's also on, and he's with Nablio.
Any of y'all want to answer how an officer can get involved with the organization?
Are they able to speak?
They should. Sean?
Maybe somebody want to text him in the chat and see if he can speak.
I'm sorry, this is Sean. How you doing?
Hey, Sean. Thank you.
Good discussion so far. For those who are interested, for those officers who are interested in either joining or getting involved with NABLIO, which is the National Association of Black Law Enforcement Officers, all they have to do is go to our website, which is www.nablio, which is NABLEO.org. I will also put it in the chat room for those who are here, but it's just www.nablio.org. We're trying to do a lot of things to help Black officers or officers of colors nationwide, because what happened to Cariol Horne 15 years ago is actually happening with so many other officers. And there have been statistical reports to show that Black officers and officers of color, they are disciplined disproportionately compared to their white counterparts. And it's happening nationwide. And on our social media platforms, we try to put that information out there so officers can understand it's not an incident that's just happening in Buffalo, New York. It's also happening in Chicago, Illinois. It's happening in St. Louis. It's happening in just all across the country. And it's based on the premise that modern day policing is, the foundation is based in systemic racism and promoting white supremacy. So we need more people, Black, white, whatever, willing to speak up about what's going on and not allowing their fear to keep them quiet. Because when you think about what Cariol did in 2006, because of her intervening, Neil Mack is alive today. And had Cariol Horne been in Minneapolis, Minnesota in 2020, George Floyd would be alive today. So we need to start making sure that we hold all officers accountable for promoting and maintaining the sanctity of life, period.
That is
Thank you for that, Sean.
absolutely right. The war is on.
Does anyone here in Zoom have any questions that you would like to ask? Just raise your hand or unmute.
Hi,
Yes,
a
Mark.
question.
Oh, yes, it's Sonia. Yes, please. Mark, you'll be next.
Hi, Carol. How are you? Good to see you.
Hi.
My question is for the gentleman that you protected and he was still alive today. Did he testify, or were they able to have him come and testify on your behalf, or did they say what happened to him? I'm curious. Did he play a role at all in your trial? Or did you have a trial board? Or how?
They didn't listen to any of us. They didn't listen to him. They didn't listen to his son who was there. They didn't listen to any of the officers, the black officers. It's like they basically didn't listen to any of the black testimony. And then the Caucasian officer who did say that he saw Neil Mack in the chokehold, they act like that testimony was not even there. As if I just made this whole thing up. I don't know if y'all can see my shirt.
You know
This
why
is
I
Neil
asked
Mack.
that? The reason why I asked that because during my trial board a month ago, they said that the officers that testified were not credible, my witnesses. And that's what I mean by they don't look at anyone that's credible if it's not helping you. Even if it's a law enforcement officer that's in that on the department and spoke on your behalf, and you have literally evidence, written evidence, and they can still say, well, they're not credible, but they're still on the police department. That's what I wanted to say.
So the officer that said that I pushed her and caused injury to her leg, she wound up getting fired. The one officer, there was the police commissioner, he wound up getting fired. The city's attorney, she wound up getting fired. There was a state Supreme Court judge who lied in the case of a friend of his. He wound up getting 6 months suspended off the bench, but I don't know why he was even allowed to get back on the bench once he was not credible. So it's like there was karma for these officers, and it showed that they were not credible. But because the police department had control over this whole case, I didn't have a chance.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow.
I have a question. Can't go into chat because I'm on my phone, but what are we thinking in terms of it's wonderful when an officer gets charged, but they get off and acquitted over and over again. There is no justice when they're not suffering any consequences for their actions. What's the next step? What can we do to change that? Or is it just the systemic entire, the whole system is stacked against people?
And qualified immunity. That's what we have to do.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mark, you're next, I believe.
Good evening, everybody. This is Mark McGuire from Long Beach, California. I am a retired Long Beach homicide detective. I retired in 2015 after 24 and a half years, and for the entire 24 and a half years, I suffered at the hands of systemic racism and racial discrimination. Cariol, I've been following your story since it happened. God bless you, my sister. I pray that you will be successful in whatever endeavors that you take on. Here in California, we are. I'm also the vice president of a newly formed group called Police Against Racism out here in Long Beach, California, LA County. We are newly formed. It formed right after the George Floyd incident, of course, and we are taking on some of the exact same topics and issues that your organization is taking on as well. So this is a beautiful thing that people all over the country are doing the same thing, and they're in the fight to end this systemic racism. And it is engulfed in the law enforcement from top to the bottom. As we know, it was started from the slavery days of slave chasing, and even some of the policies and procedures and the laws that law enforcement officers, black, white, or brown, or whatever, that we enforce are based on systemic racism to protect the whites and to keep the blacks and browns and everybody else in their place. That's just the truth. I've investigated hundreds of homicides and several, not hundreds of officer involved shootings and in custody deaths, but I was the department recognized expert of both of those before I retired. And I retired because of the stress that was put on me that I was dealing with as being the only African American in the homicide unit at Long Beach PD when I was there. So there's been a lot of stuff covered here. It's fantastic. I don't know if I'm going to say this right, but the National Association of Black Law Enforcement Organization, NABLEO, I guess, outstanding. I discovered them a couple weeks ago. I've been following them on Facebook and everywhere else. But I just wanted to say thank you. This is a great conference or event. There needs to be more of them. Here in California, we are trying to get rid of qualified immunity. We are trying to also have the decertification. Here in California, we have what we call POST, Peace Officer Standard and Training, which is where our officers are licensed, if you will, or accredited, if you will. And we're trying to get POST, or the state is trying to get POST to implement decertification for officers so that they can't go get another job if they get fired for excessive force or an unethical issue of untruthfulness or something like that. It really needs to be national, because we've had officers leave Long Beach PD and go to other agencies here in our county or Orange County and get another job, or leave California and go back east or go to the Midwest and get a job out there as a police officer. And the systemic racism and cronyism, in my opinion, is the same thing, because it's the same folks that are doing the cronyism that's in power of the systemic racism. So the sister in Nashville, God bless you, right on. I just wanted to say thank you to everybody. I'm gonna put, if you don't mind, the Police Against Racism webpage in there. We are, like I said, we're newly formed, but we are looking to do the same thing you folks are doing. And we're gonna need soldiers all over the country to do exactly what we're doing here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Mark, I am from Knoxville, Tennessee, by the way. I just want to put that out there. But I am linking up with our Nashville and our Chattanooga and our Tri-City and our Memphis community. I'm trying to push a statewide platform. So yes, brother, it doesn't matter where we at. The movement is on, and I definitely appreciate that. More power.
Well, God bless you. I have family actually in Elizabethan, Tennessee,
Okay,
which is
right
where my mom's side of the family's from. So I got some Tennessee people back there too. Thank you.
All right, keep it California blazing.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, Miss Greta. Here she comes. She coming back. Here she is.
Is it working?
Yep, there you are.
I have one
Can
more
y'all hear me at
question.
all?
Yes.
Okay.
Hear
I'm
you,
sorry.
Greta.
All right, thank you. Forgive me. Thank you, Mark. And one of the things you touched on as far as officers going here, there, and yonder, and I know, it's happening everywhere. We've got one here in Nashville who had 4 different accusations of sexual assault, several accusations of sexual harassment. He was totally off the chain with a citizen because she and the two children that she babysat for were walking on a public greenway that just happened to run behind his house, and he was threatening her and cursing the kids and things like that. He ended up uh, without authorization accessing files that he shouldn't have. And after all of that, within just some much of that in just the last year, was still allowed to resign in good standing, and he's now searching for another law enforcement job in Middle Tennessee because the department didn't report him to post. They didn't. There was no huge black marks on his record, so that is definitely something that we need desperately to fix because we can't just have them, talk about people doctor shopping. Well, they're department shopping. They just keep going and traveling around the country and so till they can find another job, and that's a big part of the problem. Oh, anyone else have a question?
I want to piggyback a little bit about what you said real quick, Greta, about the traveling around officers. I think it's important, like Brother Mark has already brought up, understand for our brothers and sisters around the globe, around the country, anyways, and even around the globe. This might be even a global conversation. You never know who's tuning into these things. But I do want to express we are in the Confederate South. I live in the state of Tennessee. And so you have to understand that where I am in Knoxville, with KPD Police Department being our primary jurisdiction, understand I have several communities, Halls, Lenore City, Claiborne County, Union County, where Klan is a big thing down here. See, I live in KKK country. And so you have to imagine what it's like to live in a location that has one of the highest Black populations in our entire state, by the way, because it's only 4 major cities that holds the majority of our population. And then having these rural areas that these individuals, and as we have already spoken about, the mindset that they have coming into our police forces from these rural areas that practice this belief system, and now having them full scale infiltrate your police department. The fear is even greater than beyond sexual assault. It is truly life or death for my community involving some of these individuals in the police force, not just in Knoxville, it's in Nashville, it's in Chattanooga, it's in the Tri-County area, it's even in Memphis. We are concerned in the state of Tennessee having encountered anywhere from a local jurisdiction to the Tennessee Highway Patrol, our Tennessee, our statewide police department. And so you just have to understand what we are feeling down here. It is true fear. And if curling law is another form of a law that can help protect us from police brutality, I'll take it all. It's something that I've already thought about, that I know that once we get the information to my organization, we're going to figure out how we can extend curl law to citizen law as well, because what we also saw in George Floyd was a small group. They're trying to make this mob crowd seen by the defense, but it's not true. It was a small group, about 12 to 15 people tops, who watched this man lose his life in 9 minutes, 29 seconds. And what I felt on the George Floyd trial, especially during the witness testimony, was the civilians who were present and the pain they expressed about not being able to do nothing. Even the store clerk said, I feel guilty because if I had just not accepted the bill or even just took it out of my own paycheck, this man would be alive right now. So that's real. That is a real thing to hear from people. The 61-year-old man who broke down crying. I thought about the civil rights movement and probably what he already survived when he seen Emmett Till and other of our members who have passed away under this brutality. So it's just a real thing to see that. And like I said, we need every form of legislation to protect our voices. But the big one is police immunity or qualified immunity, whatever way you want to choose it. Because there's a lot of forms of immunity in our Constitution. A lot of people need to look at that. Look at the immunity laws in this country. There's a lot of immunity. One of the reasons why Donald Trump got off what he did, there's actually immunity to protect him for what he has done. So understand, this country was based upon corruption from day one. Like I tell you all the time, who founded the country? A lot of wealthy white men slave owners. So that tells you who the whole country was built for. And it definitely was not built for my kind. And as others found themselves even in the same skin, you realize how they can figure out how to oppress you in the same system they use to oppress my own kind with as well. So I think that's very critical, that when we talk about stopping these police officers, these race soldiers is what I call them, moving around in different precincts, being terrorists, what they truly are at that point, continuing to do that. I know some states and some cities have built a jurisdiction law around their police departments, but there are many that still don't have such laws, and we definitely need to have that. Real talk. That's the true thing. I just want to weigh in on that.
Terry, would you like to share information on how um, officers who may be involved or interested in joining strategies for justice, how they can do that, and then any other information as far as what we as community members and organizations can do to help you?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
I'm just watching the background. You know. But so a couple of things actually. One with Cariol's law, and I was watching on Facebook. I didn't get the Zoom link until afterwards. But the one item that we really need help pushing state by state is the police registry. If you are familiar with the situation with Tamara Rice, that police officer that shot and killed Tamara Rice was actually was currently a bad officer, and he was hopping from police department to police department. And so we need a statewide, well, federal wide registry to keep track of anyone who violates Cariol's law. So that's a big thing. So if we could do anything, is to push that registry. I know PA, we have one, and we're trying to take that registry and build upon that. So we can say, if you violate Cariol's law, you have to go on the registry. And before anyone is hired in law enforcement, that registry has to be checked. Um, so that's one thing. And the other part was what Carrie was talking about, the restorative justice piece, is in Carrie's case, like she's still fighting for her pension, like even till today, right? So, we're talking like everyone, even the person, even Greg, who punched her in the face and went to jail for another incident, he still get his pension, right? And so that's a huge problem. That's a huge problem. So one thing that we are looking at is definitely any restorative justice for folks like Cariol Horne, who does the right thing, intervenes, stops someone from being choked out. They should not lose their pension. They should not lose their livelihood. So that's one thing. But yeah, if you're an officer who wants to speak out, my platform, Strategies for Justice, is just that. My great grandfather was the first Black police officer in the city of New York. He was born a slave. He walked from Kingston, North Carolina to Brooklyn, New York, where he became the first police officer. And the crap that he had to go through in 1892, you better believe it. So my goal is to continue his legacy and trying to encourage other police officers. I see some of you guys online right now, actually, that I've spoken to. And I want to get a shout out to Sean Kennedy, shout out to John Ned, shout out to Sonia Kafa, all of you, who are there doing the right thing. I want to make sure that we have a platform for those police officers to speak out and feel like they have a platform to do so. So, yeah, we're going to continue their legacy. But please, if you got it, go to cariolslaw.com to sign up, join the national movement. We are still pushing it state by state. Again, Buffalo was just the beginning. So, but thank you for, and again, thank you for supporting another one of Strategy Justice Speakers, Monica Blake. I know you guys also work with Monica Blake. She's also near and dear to my heart too. And so I appreciate everything that you guys are doing out there in Tennessee. So
She's been a great advocate for the MMPD victims. She's been a great help with that. So I love Monica to death. So um, we've got good officers. A lot of them, unfortunately, former officers because they just couldn't put up with the BS. But I mean, we've got people who want to see change and are willing to work for it, and hopefully that will slowly but surely sink in. And office with things like Cariol's law, with what we're seeing with some of the officers coming forward in the George Floyd trial, or the murder trial of George Floyd, um, officers hopefully will start having the courage to stand up. And I know what you said, Cariol, as far as they're not going to necessarily trust us. Um, and I hate that. I've unfortunately, and in large part, I'm sure it was because I'm white. I didn't not trust the community. I figured, hey, I'm here for you, so I appreciate you helping me. How can I help you more besides just driving, around the block a few times, making sure something isn't happening. Um, so hopefully we can come up with ways to reach out to departments, not necessarily in an official capacity, but maybe some of the things that we've batted around with Silent No Longer is having, you know, support groups, peer support groups. And some of the current officers who have gone public can help facilitate, and they can show up and meet some other community members. I was an officer, but now I'm just a community member, and just let them know that we support them and that we're there for them. And if something happens and they get fired or retaliated against, we got their back. So because that's, like you said, it's hard for them to trust, and it's hard for them to stand up without Cariol's law and without the support of the community.
Yeah, Greta, I was going to piggyback in to say it's everything. I have an elder here locally. He told us it's everything. We must be legislative attacking. We must be in our voting attacking. We must be in our economics attacking. We must be in our streets and our communities attacking. He said every angle when you talk about white supremacy must be under attack. So there is no wrong answer. It is everything. And that's what you are encouraged or called to do. Then you do that. And like I said, this is what we are here for. This is a collaboration, because I think the one understood goal here is that we must destroy this power system known as white supremacy. It has been allowed to survive too long. And I tell you all the time, the last dynasty of the African population was 4,000 years. And I promise you, our oppressor is trying to achieve that. And guess what? 620 years right now. So we really need to step it up, because I cannot imagine 4,000 years of white supremacy under control. I don't think Earth can survive it. I don't think the planet can live it, to be honest. I don't think the planet can live through that. But yes, no wrong answer, Ms. Greta. You're right. It must be everything, all hands on deck. Rainbow Coalition, as our ancestor Fred has called it, and Black people united internally from the inside out and being the forefront to this fight. We must destroy white supremacy.
Yeah, yesterday we were talking, Greta and I, and we were in Strong Jewel. We were talking about how some people say, well, I don't want to go out there and protest. I don't want to do this. But they can send letters, they can make phone calls. We have people who use their voice, they sing. It's like there's different ways that you can advocate. You don't have to be the person out in the street. I personally like to protest. That's my thing. I love it. So at the same time, though, I understand when people don't want to do that. They don't want to risk arrest. I understand that. I would rather be the peaceful protester. So, I mean, I am the peaceful protester, but I did get arrested. But then when I went to court, I got arrested again for showing up on my court date, because it was somebody must have owed somebody a favor, and they decided that, all right, when she goes to court, lock her up. And I got found guilty of trespassing in a public courtroom on my court date at the court time. Like it was crazy, but some people don't want to go through that. Me, I went through it because I felt like I needed to make a statement.
Exactly. And I think something that's important for all of us to remember too, especially me, is that when we're talking about this, we know that people of color are disproportionately affected by, what's going on in law enforcement as far as excessive force, um, unreasonable search and seizures, arrests, for petty things. We had a situation just a couple weeks ago where a 8-year-old and a 13-year-old who was trying to raise money to go to basketball camp was over on West End, a very affluent area, a very white area in Nashville. They were African American boys and they were arrested for panhandling. But I guarantee you, if it had been some white boys with Innsworth or MBA or some, the private school T-shirts on, the officer probably would have chipped in and helped pay for the basketball camp. So,
Mhm.
but we have to remember that when we're trying to address these things, that and this was brought up in another meeting I was in last night. We can't None of us can help you without you. And I've had this conversation several times with people, and I just everybody watching to realize that yes, it takes all of us, black, white, Asian, Native Americans, Middle Eastern. It takes all of us to fix the problem, but we have to remember that we have that not that they necessarily have to take the lead, but we have to make sure that we include those who are affected the most. That we aren't here to be saviors, that we're here to work in coalition and united because that's the only way anything's going to get done. And if we try to do it without including everyone, especially the ones most affected, then we're not going to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. And that's the end of my sermon.
Yeah, I'm gonna be more apologetic about it. Trust Black leaders, trust Black leadership, and if you want to be in this war, get behind us and follow us into this war, flat out. Black leaders are leading the way now. This is our war, it always has been. So if you want to support us, you need to get behind us and join the war.
Say black
And I'm
conscious
off my
leaders.
sermon now.
Say should say black conscious leaders because I've known some black folks that will lead you in the wrong way. Uh, I always talk about one of the greatest researchers out there was the black doll research, where you have 4-year-olds. We have white 4-year-olds, black 4-year-olds, and Hispanic 4-year-olds. And they were showing a white doll and a black doll. Ask which one's the good doll, which one's the bad doll. They all said the black doll. And they asked which one's the ugly doll, which one's the pretty doll. They all said the black doll was the ugly doll. And they asked the children which one looked like you. The black child said the black doll looks like me. So as a 4-year-old, there's enough poison to put in a child's head to say that I am bad and I am ugly. You think about it, that's where we're in. We're in a country where there's enough poison to put in a 4-year-old child's head to say I am bad and I am ugly. So when we think about trying to break the systemic, I call it the legacy and the legendary legacy of white supremacy, because it's legendary because it's been here for a long time, and it's legacy because it hasn't died yet, right? So when you're talking about breaking that, you have to realize you're not just talking about the racism, you're not just talking about this, you're talking about all the oppressions, all the institutions of oppression. That same kind of poison that would make a 4-year-old think that she is ugly and that she is bad. That's what we're doing. That's what we have to break. We got to break it from that level and on. But I will now be quiet.
Well, I need to say that
You tell me the core concept of the mindset is what you're getting to. And it's definitely the realm of the mindset. That is very, very true. That study was in the 80s. It was the doctors. I know you're talking about 2 black doctors that ran that study. Yeah, I'll be on it. But you're right. And that's where we're at. That was in the 80s, the war of the mindset started. And now we're moving forward where it's even deeper. You're right. A lot has happened. And we are definitely behind this fight. But I think you're right on the legacy part. We must break the legacy. And then you can really start attacking the principle. I'm sorry, Ms. Carol, go ahead.
okay, in my case, we have a black mayor and we had a black commissioner when I was fired. So they didn't stand up for me, even though I was right. They stood up for systemic racism. They stood up for the machine. So, I have to say that I just want people that think like me. I don't care if you're purple. I want people that think like me and move ahead with me, because everybody, that all skin folk and kinfolk, you don't all think alike.
you know, and, you know, well, I mean, I'm unapologetic when I say that, because the thing about it is I lived it. I went through it, you know. So, you know, I appreciate the fact that the mayor signed the law, you know, eventually, but it shouldn't have taken him that long. I spoke to him face to face. So he understood what the problem was. And, you know, I wanted to know, well, what can I do to, because I'm telling you the truth. Like, what do you need me to do? And it wasn't all about what I need, what, it wasn't how I could push him to do the right thing. It was about how he could save face, I guess. Because now I'm waiting on the judge's decision on my pension, but it should have been given to me. You know, it's like, if you say that these officers should have did something about George Floyd, then how are you going to say, come to me and say, well, you should be fired for doing what these officers should have done? Like, you can't have it both ways. So it's like, make up your mind. So I think that you know, I'm people ask me, well, people say, well, you should be apologized to. I don't care about an apology. It happened. They felt the way they felt when it happened, and they still feel the way they feel now. I just want to be made whole so I can just go ahead and live out my life. My children can live out their life. My grandchildren can live out their life. And so we won't have to be living in a homeless shelter no more. Because then that opens another can of worms of all this other systemic racism that's going on. But that's my rant.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate you so much. Thank you, Terry. Um, Thank you, Constance. Thank you, Sean. Thank everybody for being here. I appreciate you all taking your time to be here. I appreciate Cariol, everything that you do. Um, and have been doing, and Terry, all the support that you're giving her and law enforcement in general. And Constance, thank you for all that you have done. Constance was actually nominated by numerous people last month for Women's History Month. We had 14 people as change makers, and Constance was nominated. I think if I remember correctly, it was five or six different nominations. So she is one of our 2020 change makers, one of our all stars in Tennessee. So we are very happy to have her on board helping with this, and Black Coffee Justice being willing to co-sponsor. And I know she added so much to it. And thank you for all the questions from all those attending. If there's anything else that we can do, if I think you should have all the information for Strategies Justice, but I will post it on Silent No Longer TN. That's Silent No Longer TN on Facebook. And Constance, what is where they can find it on Black Coffee Justice?
Yes, you can find us on Black Coffee Justice on Facebook, or you can go to www.blackcoffeejustice.com. We're on Twitter at Black Coffee Just. And of course, our email is blackcoffeejustice@gmail.com. All you got to do is Google Black Coffee Justice. I promise you, it will pop up for you. Thank you all so much for having us tonight. Thank you, Greta, for an amazing opportunity to connect with an amazing network. I appreciate all the things that the national communities up are doing. Like I said, I just appreciate what we're doing in a national, local, state, and even international platform. Like I said, lottie dottie, everybody, all hands on deck. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Carol. I love you much. I'm praying for you. And if I could do anything for you, just let me know. We're in this together, always, sister to sister. We're in this together.
Sonia, we love you too.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everybody. Thank you again for being here. Bye.